National Football Signing Day can be cruel, it can be kind, and for UCLA it was definitely, most definitely the latter. We bring in a Michael Hanna of Gojo Bruin to talk about the Bruins class and all that talent coming to Westwood. Michael, you have to still be on a bit of a high because it can be a suspenseful day. And again, you could have a number of guys that have a particular team on that final 3 or 4 list, and if it goes the wrong way, it can kind of break a class. But it really made a class when it came to Jim Mora's ability to reel in some top talent.
Absolutely. And I mean, Mark, you said it. Last year in 2014, UCLA was in a similar situation where it had a lot of guys that it was in on who were announcing on signing day who were out of state, guys like Malachi Dupree, who ended up at LSU, Rashawn Evans, who ended up at Alabama, Solomon Thomas, who ended up at Stanford. And it seemed like last year in 2014, on signing day, UCLA was the eternal bridesmaid. Jim Mora even made a joke about it. But this year, things changed. They had the same amount of out-of-state talent that they were pursuing, but starting at 5:30 a.m. with Chris Clark and then going on an hour later to five-star running back Soso Jamabo, Roquan Smith, Josh Waraboko. It was just an amazing transformation in 2015. On signing day, UCLA actually did close, and it was an incredible feeling for UCLA fans to bring in that kind of level of talent when they were in dogfights with guys with teams like Michigan, with Texas, with Oklahoma, blue bloods of the sport. So for UCLA to pull out that kind of talent from the clutches of local powers like that, it shows what Jim Mora is selling in Westwood is working right now, and it's a great feeling for UCLA fans for sure.
Because of the high-profile nature of these signings, we got to hear from most of these kids, especially the ones that were teetering on the fence and made UCLA the choice. Was there anything in particular that stood out to you, or maybe was a common theme about why they chose UCLA?
It really, all these kids talked about their relationship with the coaches. Soso Jamabo, the five-star running back from Plano, Texas, he talked about his relationship with running back coach Kennedy Polamalu, how Polamalu recruited him harder than anybody else. Chris Clark talked about his relationship with Josh Rosen, the incoming quarterback for UCLA. He talked about the fact that Nolan Taylor Mazzoni, the offensive coordinator and the quarterbacks coach, who were his main recruiters, they hit it off really well and showed him how he'd be used well in the offense. Josh Waraboko talked about how offensive line coach Adrian Clem and he had formed a really strong bond. So it seemed like UCLA's coaches were able to connect with these kids on a personal level in a big way, and that was the biggest reason why they're coming to UCLA.
When we look at some of the top players in the country and look at the top recruiting classes, of course, most football fans love to see the flash and dash of the guys that can get to the edge, the wide receivers that can make or break a game, the quarterback position, of course. But when we look at the highly ranked players and the guys that really turn a recruiting class, it's typically the guys in the trenches. It's the linebackers that can make big plays in the backfield for negative yardage. So regardless of position, there's so much talent to choose from here. But who would be the one guy that you're really kind of anxious to see play on the field?
Well, if we're going to talk about the trenches, the two guys on either side of the ball, the first guy would be Keisean Lucier-Smith, the five-star defensive end from Orange Lutheran High School. We talked about him actually the last podcast I did with you. Keisean Lucier-Smith is a pass rusher extraordinaire. He's going to be somebody who UCLA is going to expect to come in and rack up sacks for the next 4 years, 3 years if he does it really well. And then on the other side of the trenches, the #1 offensive center in the country, according to Scout.com, Fred Ulu-Perry from Hawaii. And Ulu-Perry, 6'2", kind of on the smaller side height-wise for an offensive lineman, but 285, 290 pounds, really solid and muscular already as a high school senior. And he is somebody who is a mean, nasty offensive lineman. He doesn't want to just pancake you. He just wants to crush your soul while he's blocking you. So he's somebody who might be able to step in to the two deep immediately and maybe get some playing time at offensive guard in his first year while he's learning the offense. And then when UCLA senior center Jake Brendel goes to the NFL after the 2015 season, Ulu-Perry can step in at center right after that, after they've transitioned him into the system a little bit. So those are the two guys to watch on either side of the trenches for UCLA, and we're really excited to see both of those guys.
Michael, some people like to discount the individual rankings or the team rankings. Now, I don't think there's any question that if you look at the team rankings, they tie directly to major bowl games, winning conference championships, winning national championships. There is no doubt about that. There is a tie between Ohio State, Florida State, Alabama, those schools that continually finish in the top 5 or 10 in the country, and their recruiting rankings. When it comes to individuals, I think it's much like the NFL draft. I think there's a trend there. No, not every 5-star guy pulls through. Not every top 5 guy at his position pulls through and becomes an impact player. Prior to National Signing Day, just a few minutes before we started to get the coverage, I started going through the top 25 or 30 overall players from the past 4 to 5 years. And I tell you, it was pretty impressive, the number of impact players. There were just a few guys that I had never heard of that didn't make it. So you have to feel good about the correlation between what's pulled through in the past as being a highly ranked player and the probability that he's at least going to be a productive player.
Actually, you bring up a great point, Mark. I think it was Bud Elliott from SB Nation who wrote an article last year about the fact that every national champion since the BCS era started has had a team where more than half of their players were either 4 or 5-star recruits, what he called the blue chip ratio. And UCLA, tying it back to UCLA, this is a class where UCLA brought in 2/3 of its recruits, either 4 or 5-star kids. So, I mean, UCLA had a very high blue chip ratio. And, yeah, you're always going to have a fail rate, but at the same time, the probability of these guys succeeding is much higher. And then on top of that, they're rated so highly for reasons because they have the highest projections as far as upside is concerned. So these aren't just going to be guys who are going to project to be solid players down the line once they develop. These are the guys who are going to develop into stars based on what their upside would be if they reach their potential properly. And of course, coaching comes into that. You're taking the raw talent and trying to mold it, but you need that raw talent. You need those Jimmies and Joes in order to make the X's and O's work. So yeah, that's why UCLA is so happy to have brought in so many highly rated guys like you mentioned.
Yeah, it's a numbers game. I don't think there's any question about it. And when you look at anywhere for most schools between 20 and 30 prospects that are brought in and signed in any particular year, then you multiply that out to an entire roster. The 4 and 5-star recruits are going to play out in the probabilities. And if you have too many 2 and 3 stars, yes, we know that they turn into J.J. Watts and Russell Wilsons. There's no doubt about that. There's plenty of examples out there. But by and large, the numbers will prove out in the end. Michael Hanna joins us from Gojo Bruin. And, hey, Michael, we appreciate the insight and the information. You do a nice job of breaking things down for us.
Oh, anytime, Mark. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.